This week's economic update is presented by Augusta Business Daily and TAB, the Alternative Board.
And you believe that you should hire people not just for what they know, but for who they are. And how do you screen for both parts of that equation so that you get the possible?
Thanks, Mike. Hand in hand, I say we often hire for what somebody knows, and we fire them for who they are. We hire for people for what they know, and we often let them go for who they are. And my thoughts are that we often, think about it in your own hiring practices. You look at a resume. On resumes, it often talks about what they know. It doesn't necessarily talk about who they are. And so I think in the interview process, it's important, Mike, to your question, certainly what they know is very important, but I would also tell you who they are equally and maybe arguably even more important. And so a learning that I would try to throw out to everybody is ask yourself, are you trying to do your best? And this sort of goes along with what Patrick's examples were. Get to know that person. Okay, I've heard scenarios of going out with the significant other, understanding, having multiple people interview. I had an individual on one of my boards actually take a potential prospect to this actual stadium and entertain them at a baseball game. And he said by the second inning, I knew it wasn't the right person. Maybe the third inning, maybe I got it wrong, but he said his words were, it was the best money I'd ever spent. And honestly, it's not just for that person, but I believe the employee. This is about job fit. This is honestly, your employer, you're interviewing the candidate, but I equally believe the candidate is interviewing the employer. And so it's really that opportunity to get to know each other and understand that. So that's why I say that, Mike.
Pragmatically, though, if you're a hiring manager and you've got dozens of candidates, you're trying to whittle it down, how do you screen for that? You can't take everybody to a Green Jackets game, but there are things you can do.
Well, I think just ask yourself, how much time are you putting into the effort? If you agree with me that, hey, this is one of the most important tasks that I do, is recruit somebody on my team, maybe that will be here for 20 years or more with me. That's a pretty important task. How much effort are you putting into that? What I typically see is, hey, somebody gives me a resume or maybe multiple resumes. I screen through them and I go through and interview for an hour, hour and a half each, and then make ultimately a decision. I think you got to really step back and go, can I be doing this task ample effort just based on the time? So whether it's a restaurant, a baseball game, getting to meet the significant other, I think some of it's just based on time can really give you an indication how well you're doing in this area. The other thing I always like to ask is, and Patrick said it differently, but maybe you are fortunate that you have 10 or 15 clients. I find it very coincidental that often somebody hires the first person that they interview, and you just happen to get the lotto ticket and the right person shows up and you hire that first person. And I think that's certainly potentially a warning sign too, if you're always batting a high percentage on the people that come in and you offer them the job. Seems maybe a little not right.
Questions from the audience?
And how are you? What's your name?
My name is Jason. Do you want to hold it? No, you Phil Donahue this. Go ahead. Right? All right.
What company are we with?
I am with Kite & Key Solutions. So, and you have both, it looks like, stated your cultures pretty upfront. I'm curious to know, do you do that in your job announcements as well? Because I think we've lost the art of the cover letter and the value that it brings, because you said we fire people for who they are instead of hiring them for who they are, because we're not getting the extra input for getting to know that person. And so, some of the feedback that I get over time is that if you state up front what you want, what you're looking for, even the type of culture that you have, then I guess I've resonated with something with you here. Then those are going to be the people that they're going to know what to expect, even in applying for that position. So are you in your job announcements even stating the type of culture you are, mandating a cover letter for the intent to know what meaningful work they would be a part of?
Darin?
Ideally, that's exactly right. I ask a lot of owners, tell me what your values are. How can you go hire if you don't know what your values are? And honestly, some do have them and some don't. But I think your assertion of, do they then take those values and get it into the DNA of their company day to day, things like how we're going to hire, what's our job interview. Folks ask me, well, how am I going to interview, how I'm to figure somebody out? Well, if one of your values in your company, let's say, is teamwork. Well, why wouldn't you have one of your interview questions say, hey, tell me about a time when you really had a conflict with a teammate of yours in a previous job. Tell me how that worked out. I mean, we don't typically put that kind of thought to it. We're more of a hope and a prayer, and boy, it felt good, and that individual's resume looked very good. So to me, values, if you sit and build your team, vision and values, there's a lot of folks that think that's soft, fluffy stuff. That soft, fluffy stuff is really where you make your sausage. And there's a lot of times that isn't really enforced. Things like cover letters, how to interview. And I would employ everybody to take those things into consideration, visions and values, and use them appropriately.
This week's economic update is presented by Augusta Business Daily and TAB, the Alternative Board. To learn how TAB can help your business, visit tabcsra.com.